Hello, my name is Daniel Vasquez. I am the author of The Orange Sons of the Western Shore. This is Chapter 2, The City's Shadows. California is too lenient of a state for true change to occur. There's a monster feel of relaxation and lack of true progress toward a single goal. It's as if the entire state has slumped into a beanbag and drank a bottle of rum to release the worries, and now they're too calm watching the sunsets to appreciate the panic of the rest of the world. I took a break from Jane as I wasn't fully attracted to the city enough to sit and stare and wonder of how I plan not to leave. Needless to say, the booze had changed gears on me after one too many words from a cowboy. I went to further my personal findings of the place after a polite excuse that didn't get second looks, confirming a most common fear of men my age. Inside was a maze of navy coats and drinks that resembled coffee, constantly on the edge of spilling and characters sizing you up with every sip. There was a style that I wasn't used to in full effect, a pinpoint of an idea, thrown to the wind and tainted into a new propaganda-filtered panache. There was a slow rhythmic flow to it. Small movements in all corners caught the attention of the eye, none anything great, but all still more intriguing than the daily circumference. I had a cup of coffee and was drawing on the counter underneath a portrait of a full-size woman down the bar when the reason of my journey to begin with finally came walking in through the side door. He had on a short apron, a piece of chalk in his ear, and a large tattoo of a lobster smoking a cigar stretched on his shoulder. Wilk slammed an empty tray of shots on the counter with a smile toward some inner hypocrisy, and then licked his lips in a clumsy manner as if searching for a cigar himself. For a few minutes I sat there wondering where his wits might be, how much I knew of him was true, and how the rest of this week might unfold, let alone this night I was well into. How many connections would be made, and the constant teardown of how everything may or may not come to my liking. But after another round of sake, I waved his smiling self over for a warm conversation about napkins and the Europeans, and inched with a drunken kindness toward my real business. Wilk managed a sushi/barbecue joint, owned a white cat named Penny, played the harmonica before bed, and controlled a large population of the Western Front, called the Orange Sons. The Orange Sons were a mass of stories that fall between the lines. They were the shadows of yesterday's murder, still walking around the city, lost in the only streets they knew. They seemed to be everywhere, yet no one knew an actual number, just the fact that a few of them could always be found at the Red Clocks. Their beginnings, on the other hand, had become as vast as their number, since each answered a vendetta unique to his own. As the Playboy boom of rich entrepreneurs snaked its way from the East Coast, problems arose with the already deeply rooted systems of both narcotics and illegal-like booze that more than thrived below the city's radar. California's whole underground system was loosely built on a few strands that held tight all the way to Oregon before bleeding like a fountain pen on its tracks back down into Baja. The Playboys could afford to not only find the state source, but build as soon as they burned down. And so they burned. At first fires that led to findings of large drug dens sprinkled across the state, and then houses that were at once neighborhood capitals began to suddenly fall overnight, and eventually executions of whole gangs cleaned out by an army of mystery men that were never to be seen again but still show remarkable resemblance to military tactics. And in the blood of those dirty gangs were families that suddenly lost a father, a brother, and even mothers, leaving children and young men homeless and lost in a new city that washed away its problems only to recycle its addicts in a wave of drugs at high volume prices. Among the victims were also the sober, who had no ties to the many coyotes put down, but all seemed to be part of a new drowning lawn of mistaken identities. The suddenly homeless had even less popularity among the small town authorities that were currently fighting the lasting peace fighters of the sum of the 70s by orders of the Playboys. The orphan limit flooded the city, and the only one to take into account this sudden boom of young fatherless boys was a man who lost his own family. The men or boys that were lucky enough to be called Orange Sons had broken through the city's cracks and found themselves in an almost invisible state, a kingdom of sons without fathers, some even caring for younger siblings, forming small groups that would break into abandoned warehouses and homes for shelter, which is where Wilk met his first, but not last, son.
There are a few who watch the streets, those who live on them, and those who have lost something on them. For these people I breathe.
A quote from Wilk I always remembered in one of my many letters from my brother, who had found himself searching for a greater truth farther and farther from home. Of all that was said through papers and the murmurs of people that couldn't actually point him out in a room, I was never afraid to meet the man, only nervous. An anger that teaches you violence and a justified fear of the next corner, in a city where none are trusted right away, will keep anyone on their toes, which is exactly where I plan to stay. As far as appearances, the Sons never seemed to cause trouble. Although the city knew them for fighters of a different breed, the stories I had heard spoke of them as a swarm of men that spun from the veins of the city, only to be compared to locusts that ate like bears and fought like gladiators, an army of the city clenching to the bones of the people, but plagued by the land's own hearts and desires. I knew this because my brother knew this, and all too often, alone on the other side of the sky, I would spend my time in the vast mountain ridges, reading of a world of current gladiators, fighting among the streets for a brotherhood that had swallowed up my kith and kin. His words, running through the hills, past us, straight on into a city at the end of the sunset. Always the cosmic end to a feverishly mundane day. He spoke of the men as a whole, singling out only one or two of them, but always at the threshold of breaking down the struggle that he observed deep within Wilk. He had a knack for stirring the pulse at the back of your neck until he got what he was looking for. But this new fascinating world had him by surprise, and I could see a new form of him emerging straight out of the sea. At first, who could decipher this excitement in his words? Certainly not me. But before long, his letters began to evolve into a constant race. He would send out 3 letters at a time, packed to the brim of the progress. I had to admit, there was a call. The fire and the hunt, as my brother had told me. Wilk would never support the treacherous. Among their high horse, they were still a force not suited for the average town. The methods were hidden and yet laying on the sidewalk. Their kind was a beast you wouldn't want to encounter, and yet they flooded the streets too powerful for any man-made dam to hold. The attire had once existed of an orange sun on the left arm of Wilk's comrades, black jeans, white oil-stained shirts, and an assortment of bowie knives as vast as its members' rationale. All but the knives and the message Wilk was known for on the street still existed in full pattern. That and some of the die-hard brutes still wore the patch when they were pinned into playing it safe. Wilk laughed at the thought I brought out about my intense hate for sundials. Then, as quick as the record switched to dusty Springfield, I asked about Scotch, my older stepbrother, who had managed to break into a harsh crowd of boy-holding misfits somewhere on the western shore. Scotch's reputation didn't leave a forwarding address, and it had been a little too long for the rest of the waiting world of Eastern America to experience his presence. His unsympathetic propaganda letters of his orange escapades had stopped, and Wilk was deeply engraved in my mind as the man who would solve this problem in one way or another. Even so, I had never met the man and was going off a magazine's word as to how he looked in an apron.